Thomas Reed pushed his cleaning cart down the empty corridor of Station Meridian, the wheels squeaking against the metal floor. It was 3 in the morning, that dead hour when even the busiest spaceport fell silent. He'd been doing this job for 20 years now, mopping up spills and emptying trash bins while the rest of the galaxy slept. Most people looked right through him like he was part of the furniture. That was fine by Thomas. He liked the quiet. Liked the simplicity of work where you could see what you accomplished at the end of each shift. The cargo bay stretched out before him, vast and dimly lit. Stacks of containers waited for the morning crews to sort and load onto outbound ships. Thomas had cleaned this bay 1,000 times. He knew every corner, every shadow, every flickering light that maintenance kept promising to fix. That's why the sound stopped him cold. It was soft, barely audible over the hum of the station's life support systems. A whimper. Like a small animal in pain. Thomas set down his mop and listened. There it was again, coming from behind a row of waste containers marked for disposal. His first thought was rats. The station had problems with them sometimes, stowing away on cargo ships. But as he got closer he realized the sound was different. More deliberate. Almost like crying. Thomas pulled out his flashlight and aimed it behind the containers. What he saw made his blood run cold. A child sat there, curled into the smallest ball possible. Her skin shimmered silver under the light, and her limbs looked impossibly fragile. He recognized her species immediately. Valith. He'd seen them around the station before, tall and elegant, dripping with expensive jewelry and treating everyone else like servants. But this child looked nothing like those proud merchants. She was starving. He could count every rib through her thin clothing. Her legs bent at wrong angles, clearly broken or deformed. Dark bruises covered her arms and face. When his light hit her, she tried to scramble backward, but her legs wouldn't work. She could only drag herself with her arms, leaving smears of blood on the floor from her scraped hands. The terror in her eyes hit Thomas like a physical blow. "Easy there," he said softly, lowering the flashlight so it wouldn't blind her. "I'm not gonna hurt you, sweetheart." She didn't understand him. That much was obvious from the blank fear on her face. She pressed herself against the wall and made a sound deep in her throat, something between a sob and a scream that she was trying desperately to hold in. Thomas's mind raced through possibilities. This child didn't end up here by accident. The cargo bay was restricted. You needed clearance to enter. Someone had brought her here deliberately and hidden her behind containers scheduled to be incinerated in 6 hours. He'd heard stories about the Valith. Whispered conversations in the station bars when the dock workers had too much to drink. Stories about what they did with children who weren't perfect. Who couldn't walk or see or hear properly. The Valith believed in physical perfection above all else. Anything less was considered shameful. Unworthy. Looking at this terrified child, hidden away like garbage, Thomas felt something hot and angry rise in his chest. He should call security. That's what the rules said. But if he called security, they'd contact the Valith authorities. And whoever had dumped this child here would make sure she disappeared permanently. Thomas made his decision in that moment, knowing it would change everything. He slowly shrugged off his jacket and laid it on the ground between them. The child flinched at the movement, pressing harder against the wall. But Thomas just stepped back and held up his empty hands. "You're freezing," he said gently. "Take it. Please." She stared at the jacket like it might bite her. Minutes passed. Thomas didn't move, didn't speak, just waited. Eventually the cold won out over fear. A tiny hand reached out and grabbed the jacket, pulling it close. She wrapped it around her shoulders and some of the shaking stopped. Thomas smiled. "That's better, isn't it?" He sat down cross-legged on the cold floor, making himself smaller and less threatening. From his lunch bag he pulled out a sandwich he'd packed for his break. Ham and cheese on wheat bread, nothing fancy. He tore it in half and placed one piece on the ground between them, then took a bite of his half. The child watched him with eyes that seemed far too old for her face. Intelligent eyes that calculated and assessed. After a long moment she reached out and took the food. She ate like someone who hadn't seen a meal in days, shoving it into her mouth so fast she nearly choked. "Slow down," Thomas said. "There's more if you want it." He gave her the rest of his sandwich, then the apple from his bag, then the cookies his neighbor had baked for him. She ate everything, tears streaming down her face the whole time. When she finally finished, Thomas pointed to himself. "Thomas? My name is Thomas." She looked at him blankly. He tried again, exaggerating the gesture. "Thomas?" Then he pointed to her with a questioning expression. The child's face crumpled. She shook her head violently and curled into a ball, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Whatever her name was, it clearly hurt too much to say it. "Okay, Thomas said softly. That's okay. How about I call you something else? Just for now. He thought for a moment. How about Lily? I had a daughter named Lily once. Long time ago. The child stopped crying and looked at him. She didn't protest, didn't nod, just watched him with those huge violet eyes. Thomas glanced at his watch. Another 3 hours until the morning shift arrived. 3 hours until the cargo crews would start loading containers for disposal. He looked at the child, at Lily, shivering in his jacket with crumbs on her face. Listen, he said. I live here on the station. Got a small apartment, nothing special, but it's warm. Got food and a bed and nobody asking questions. He held out his hand. Want to come home with me? Lily stared at his outstretched hand for a long time. Then, slowly, she reached out and placed her small hand in his. Her fingers were ice cold and thin as bird bones. Thomas carefully, gently, lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. Her body went rigid with fear, but he started humming an old song his mother used to sing, and gradually she relaxed. By the time they reached the residential section, her head had drooped against his shoulder. His apartment was small and cluttered, full of 20 years of accumulated junk. Thomas laid Lily on the couch and covered her with a blanket. She fell asleep immediately, exhausted beyond measure. While she slept, he worked quietly, clearing out his storage room and turning it into a bedroom. Clean sheets on the bed. A lamp in the corner. A glass of water on the nightstand. When Lily woke up, confused and frightened, Thomas was there with warm soup and gentle words. He showed her everything slowly. The bathroom. The shower. The clothes he'd found, a soft t-shirt that hung on her like a tent. She ate 4 bowls of soup that first night. Over the next few days they found a rhythm. Thomas would work his night shift, sleep a few hours, then spend his afternoons with Lily. She never spoke, only pointed and gestured. But the terror in her eyes began to fade, replaced by cautious curiosity. She watched everything he did with intense focus, learning, absorbing. The problem of her legs kept Thomas up at night. She couldn't walk, could barely crawl without pain. He couldn't carry her everywhere forever. On his day off, he went down to the station's recycling center and came back with an armload of spare parts. Lily watched from the couch, fascinated, as Thomas spread everything out on the floor. Wheels from an old cargo dolly. Cushioning from a broken chair. Metal pipes he could weld together. It wasn't much, but it might work. It took him 4 days to build something usable. A crude wheelchair made from garbage and determination. When he finally showed it to Lily, her eyes went wide with wonder. "Want to try?" he asked. He lifted her carefully into the seat and showed her how the wheels worked. At first she just sat there, hands resting uncertainly on the rims. Then she pushed and the chair rolled forward 6 inches. The look on her face made every sleepless hour worth it. She stared down at the wheels, at her own hands controlling them, and something like joy broke across her features. She pushed again, harder this time, and rolled across the room. Then she laughed. It was the first sound she'd made besides crying, a bright crystalline sound that filled the apartment. She rolled faster, spinning in circles, laughing harder with each turn. Thomas found himself laughing too, wiping tears from his eyes. When Lily finally stopped, breathless and glowing, she rolled up to Thomas and looked at him for a long moment. Then she pointed to herself, then to him, then pressed both hands over her heart. "Yeah," Thomas said, his voice rough. "I know, Lily. Me too." That night, he hung a picture on her bedroom wall. Just a simple frame with both their names written inside. It wasn't legal or official, but it was real. She was his daughter now. And he was going to keep her safe no matter what. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. The morning sun filtered through the apartment windows as Beth finished packing Tommy's lunchbox. Her husband Kevin was already heading out the door for his construction job, planting a quick kiss on her cheek before leaving. Tommy sat at the kitchen table, swinging his legs and humming a tune only he understood. "Ready for daycare, buddy?" Beth asked, zipping up his backpack. Tommy nodded enthusiastically. He loved daycare. There were toys and other kids and snack time. But lately, something else had captured his attention. The janitor. The quiet man who always smiled at him and sometimes let him help carry the small trash bags. Beth drove through the morning traffic, her mind already running through her schedule at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. Money was tight, as it always seemed to be. The car needed new tires. The rent was going up next month. But they managed. They always managed. She dropped Tommy off at Little Star's daycare, watching as he ran inside without looking back. That was a good sign, the daycare director had told her once. Meant he felt safe there. What Beth didn't know was that her son had become fascinated with a mystery. Tommy had noticed things about Alan that the adults missed. Like how Alan sometimes stood perfectly still and stared at the sky during his break. Or how he never ate lunch, just sat on the back steps holding an empty lunch bag. Or how his eyes looked sad even when he was smiling. During afternoon playtime, Tommy slipped away from the other children. He found Alan in the storage room, organizing cleaning supplies with methodical precision. "Hi, Alan," Tommy said from the doorway. Alan turned, and his face brightened genuinely. "Hello, Tommy. Shouldn't you be playing with your friends? Can I help you?" Tommy asked, stepping inside. Alan hesitated, then handed him a roll of paper towels to place on the lower shelf. They worked in comfortable silence for a moment. "Alan, where do you live?" Tommy asked suddenly. The question caught Alan off guard. His hands paused over a bottle of floor cleaner. I have a place," he said carefully. "Do you have a family?" Alan's expression shifted into something Tommy didn't quite understand. Sadness mixed with something else. Longing maybe. "Not here," Alan said softly. "My family is very far away. Do you miss them?" "Every single day." Tommy thought about this. He couldn't imagine being away from his mom and dad. Even one night at Grandma's house felt like forever. "That must be really hard," he said with the simple honesty that only children possess. Alan looked at this small human child and something in his chest tightened. Back home he had younglings of his own. 3 of them. He'd left them behind when he volunteered for this observation mission, believing it would only last a few months. That was 4 years ago. "It is hard," Alan admitted. "But I have a job to do." "Cleaning?" Tommy asked, confused about why cleaning would keep someone from their family. "Something like that," Alan said. He couldn't explain that his real job was watching, learning, reporting back to his people about whether humans could be trusted. Whether they were worthy of contact or just another aggressive species to be avoided. For 4 years he'd watched humans through the lens of their garbage and their carelessness. He'd seen waste and pollution and thoughtless destruction. He'd filed reports about their primitive violence and their disregard for their own planet. But lately something had been shifting in his observations. "Tommy? There you are." Miss Rebecca's voice called from the hallway. "Come on, sweetie, it's story time." Tommy waved goodbye to Alan and ran off. Alan returned to his supplies, but his mind wandered. He thought about Beth, who always thanked him even though most people looked through him like he was invisible. He thought about Kevin, who'd once spent 20 minutes helping him fix the wheel on the cleaning cart without being asked. He thought about the teacher, Miss Rebecca, who used her own money to buy extra books for the classroom. About the elderly man who volunteered every Tuesday to read to the children despite his shaking hands. About the teenage girl who'd helped him pick up scattered trash on a windy day. These weren't the behaviors of a species to be avoided. These were acts of kindness from creatures who had so little themselves but gave anyway. That evening, as Alan prepared his weekly report, his fingers hovered over the communication device hidden in his small apartment. The sparse room contained only a mattress on the floor and the equipment necessary for his mission. He looked at the standard phrases he always used: species remains volatile. Recommendation: maintain distance. Continue observation. But tonight the words felt wrong. Tonight, thinking about Tommy's innocent questions and Beth's tired smile and all the small kindnesses he'd witnessed, Alan found himself writing something different. Something that would change everything. The next morning started like any other. Beth dropped Tommy off at daycare, reminding him to share his toys and listen to Miss Rebecca. She had no idea that today would shatter everything she thought she knew about the world. Alan arrived at his usual time, pushing his cleaning cart through the familiar hallways. But something was different. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the cart handle. Last night he'd sent the report that would end his mission. He'd told his people the truth about humans and now he waited for their response. It came sooner than expected. At 10 in the morning, the sky above the city began to shimmer. People on the streets stopped and pointed upward. Parents at the daycare rushed to the windows, gasping as massive ships materialized in the atmosphere. Not one or two but dozens of them hovering silently over major cities across the planet. Inside Little Star's daycare, chaos erupted. Children cried. Teachers frantically tried to call parents. Miss Rebecca held 3 terrified kids in her arms, her own face pale with fear. The television in the staff room showed news anchors struggling to maintain composure as they reported the impossible. Humanity was not alone in the universe, and whoever was up there had just announced themselves in the most dramatic way possible. Tommy didn't cry. He stood at the window, pressing his small hands against the glass, staring at the ships with wide eyes. Then he turned and ran, not toward Miss Rebecca but toward the storage room. He found Alan there, standing motionless, staring at nothing. "Alan," Tommy said quietly. "Are those your family?" Alan's head snapped toward the boy. His carefully maintained human appearance flickered for just a moment, revealing something else underneath. Something with golden eyes and skin that shimmered like starlight. Then it was gone and he was just Alan again. The janitor. The invisible man. "How did you know?" Alan whispered. "You always looked at the sky like you were looking for something," Tommy said simply. "And you're not scared like everyone else. You look different. Like you're waiting." Before Alan could respond, Beth burst into the room. She'd abandoned her shift at the hospital the moment the ships appeared, driving like a madwoman to reach her son. She saw Tommy standing with Alan and rushed forward, pulling her child behind her protectively. "Stay away from him," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "Mom, it's okay," Tommy said. "Alan's nice. He's not going to hurt anyone." Alan raised his hands slowly, a gesture of peace. "He's right. I'm not here to harm anyone. I never was." "Then what are you here for?" Beth demanded. Her heart pounded in her chest. The world was ending. Aliens were real. And somehow her son was mixed up in all of it. Alan looked at this frightened mother, this woman who worked double shifts to provide for her family, who always said thank you, who treated him like a person when others didn't. "I was sent to observe your species," he said quietly. "To determine if humans were worth knowing. Worth saving." "Saving from what?" Beth's grip on Tommy tightened. "From yourselves mostly. And from others in the galaxy who see you as primitive and dangerous." Alan moved slowly to the window, gesturing at the ships above. "My people have watched Earth for centuries. We've seen your wars, your destruction, your violence. Many wanted to leave you alone, to let you destroy yourselves eventually. But some of us believed there was more to humanity than violence. So they sent observers. People like me." Miss Rebecca appeared in the doorway with several other teachers, all of them drawn by the sound of voices. They stood frozen, listening to Alan's confession. "I've been here for 4 years," Alan continued. "Living as one of you. Working a job that made me invisible so I could watch without being noticed. For most of that time I reported what I expected to find. Waste, carelessness, aggression. And now?" Beth asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alan turned to face them all. "And then I met a little boy who offered to help me carry trash. Who asked me about my family and listened when I said I missed them. I watched his mother work herself to exhaustion but still find energy to be kind. I saw a teacher spend her own money on books for children who weren't hers. I witnessed 1,000 small acts of compassion from a species that barely has enough for itself." He knelt down to Tommy's eye level. "You showed me that humans don't just survive. You care. Even when it's hard. Even when no one's watching. That's rare in the universe. That's precious." A communication device on Alan's belt beeped. He touched it and a holographic image appeared in the air. It showed a being similar to Alan but clearly more important, dressed in elaborate robes. "Observer Alan," the figure said in a language that somehow everyone could understand. "Your report has been received and debated. We have decided. First contact will proceed. Humanity will be welcomed into the galactic community." The room erupted in gasps and questions, but Alan only smiled at Tommy. The janitor had saved the world and nobody had even noticed him doing it. The holographic figure faded, leaving stunned silence in the storage room. Beth still held Tommy close, her mind racing to process what she'd just heard. The janitor who'd cleaned their floors for years wasn't human. And somehow, impossibly, he'd just saved their entire species. "I don't understand," Miss Rebecca finally spoke, her voice shaky. "Why a janitor? Why not approach our leaders? Our scientists?" Alan stood slowly, brushing dust from his worn uniform. "Because leaders and scientists show you their best faces. They perform. But a janitor?" He gestured to his cart full of cleaning supplies. "Nobody performs for the janitor. Nobody pretends. When you think no one important is watching, that's when you show who you really are." Kevin burst through the daycare entrance, having abandoned his construction site the moment the ships appeared. He found Beth and Tommy and wrapped them both in his arms. "Thank God you're safe," he breathed. Then he noticed Alan and the strange tension in the room. "What's going on?" Tommy wiggled free from his father's embrace. "Dad, Alan's an alien. And he told his people that humans are good." Kevin blinked. "What? Twice?" Then he looked at Alan with an expression somewhere between disbelief and anger. "You've been watching us? Spying on us?" "Yes," Alan said simply. He wouldn't insult them with denials. For 4 years I observed. I took your trash. I cleaned your floors. I listened to your conversations. And I reported everything to my superiors. That's... Kevin struggled for words. That's a violation. Of privacy. Of trust. You're right, Alan acknowledged. But understand we had to know. In the galaxy, there are thousands of intelligent species. Some are peaceful. Some are dangerous. When a species develops technology capable of leaving their planet, they become everyone's problem. We needed to know which kind you were. Outside, the ships remained motionless in the sky. News helicopters circled at a distance, not daring to get too close. Every television station on Earth broadcast the same images. Every phone buzzed with emergency alerts. The world held its breath. Beth's nursing instincts kicked in despite her fear. You said you've been here 4 years. Away from your family. That must have been incredibly hard. Alan's expression softened. I have 3 children. The youngest was barely walking when I left. She's probably running now, talking, asking questions about everything. His voice cracked slightly. I missed all of it. Then why stay? Beth asked. Why not go home sooner? Because I kept seeing contradictions, Alan explained. I'd watch someone throw trash on the ground and I'd write in my report that humans were careless. But then I'd see another person pick it up without being asked. I'd observe violence on your news broadcasts, but then I'd witness everyday people stopping to help strangers. You confused me. Your species is full of contradictions. Tommy tugged on Alan's sleeve. What made you change your mind about us? Alan crouched down again, meeting the boy's eyes. You did, Tommy. And your parents. And Miss Rebecca. You see, my people value logic above all else. Efficiency. Order. But you humans have something we lost a long time ago. You have hope even when things are hopeless. You're kind even when kindness doesn't benefit you. You love even when love brings pain. More parents arrived, flooding into the daycare. The staff tried to maintain order, but fear and confusion reigned. Someone had called the police. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Alan touched his communication device. I need to go. My people will want to meet with your world leaders soon. We have protocols for first contact. Wait, Beth said suddenly. What happens now? To Earth? To us? That depends on you, Alan replied. We'll offer technology, knowledge, access to the galactic community. But we won't force anything. Humanity gets to choose its own path. And if we choose wrong? Kevin asked, still wary. Then we'll be disappointed. But we won't abandon you. That's what I learned here. That's what I put in my report. Humans deserve the chance to grow, to learn, to become better. Just like you gave me a chance, even when I was just the invisible janitor. Police cars pulled up outside. Officers emerged, hands on weapons, shouting orders that no one could quite hear over the chaos. The ships above cast shadows across the city, a constant reminder that nothing would ever be the same. Miss Rebecca gathered the children into the reading corner, trying to create some sense of normalcy. But they all kept glancing at the windows, at the impossible sight in the sky. Alan moved toward the door, but Tommy ran to him one last time. Will we see you again? Alan smiled, and for a moment, his disguise flickered again. Golden eyes. Shimmering skin. A glimpse of something beautiful and strange. I promise, he said. I'll come back. Someone needs to check if you're still helping carry the trash. Tommy laughed despite everything. Despite the fear and the chaos and the ships in the sky. Because some things, like a child's laughter, were universal. Alan walked out into the sunlight, ready to face whatever came next. Behind him, a small human family watched through the window, connected forever to the janitor who'd seen the best in them when the galaxy had expected the worst. Retried. 3 months had passed since the ships first appeared. The world had changed in ways both massive and subtle. Alien diplomats walked the halls of the United Nations. Human scientists collaborated with extraterrestrial researchers. And in a small daycare center, life continued with one significant difference. Everyone now knew that the janitor pushing the cleaning cart wasn't what he seemed. Alan still came to work every day. He'd been offered a position as an official ambassador, a role with prestige and recognition. He turned it down. I'm not finished observing, he told the disappointed officials. And besides, someone needs to keep these floors clean. The children loved him more than ever. Parents no longer looked through him. They stopped to chat, to ask questions about his home world, to thank him for what he'd done. Alan found it overwhelming sometimes. He'd spent 4 years being invisible. Being seen was strange. On a Tuesday morning in early spring, something extraordinary happened. Tommy was playing with blocks in the corner when Alan arrived. The boy ran over immediately as he always did now. Alan, guess what? My dad got a promotion. We're going to move to a bigger apartment. That's wonderful news, Alan said, genuinely happy for the family that had shown him so much kindness. Will you come visit us? Tommy asked. Of course. They were interrupted by a commotion at the entrance. Several people in elaborate robes entered the daycare, clearly not human despite their humanoid appearance. Miss Rebecca hurried to greet them, her expression confused and slightly panicked. The lead figure scanned the room until his eyes landed on Alan. Observer Alan, he said formally. We've been searching for you. Alan straightened, his casual demeanor shifting into something more guarded. Council Member Torvin. I submitted my reports on schedule. Is there a problem? Torvin's expression was unreadable. Your presence is required immediately. There's been a development. A significant one. I'm working, Alan said simply. This cannot wait. Torvin's tone left no room for argument. Beth had arrived early that morning and witnessed the exchange. She stepped forward protectively. He said he's working. Whatever you need can wait until his shift ends. Torvin looked at this human woman with surprise. On his world, no one spoke to a council member with such directness. This concerns Observer Alan's family. His real family. Alan's face went pale. What's happened? Are they hurt? No one is hurt, Torvin said, his voice softening slightly. But there are truths you must learn. Truths we've kept from you. An hour later, Alan sat in a conference room hastily arranged at the city's convention center. Torvin and 3 other council members sat across from him. Beth had insisted on coming, and somehow Tommy had convinced her to bring him along. They sat in the corner, quiet observers to whatever was about to unfold. Alan, Torvin began, what do you know about your birth parents? Alan frowned. I was orphaned as an infant. Raised in a communal facility. It's common enough on our world. That's what we told you, Torvin said carefully. The truth is more complicated. A holographic display flickered to life, showing images of beings that looked like Alan's true form, but dressed in ornate regalia. Royal regalia. Your birth parents were Emperor Callion and Empress Mira of the Stellar Dominion, Torvin explained. You are the firstborn heir to the throne. The room fell silent. Even Tommy, who didn't fully understand, sensed the weight of those words. Alan stared at the images. That's impossible. Why would royalty abandon their child? They didn't abandon you, another council member spoke up. They hid you. There was a prophecy, you see. Ancient words passed down for generations. It spoke of an heir who would walk among lesser beings and return transformed. An heir who would change the empire forever by learning to see value in the overlooked. That's ridiculous, Alan said, but his voice wavered. Is it? Torvin gestured to the hologram, which shifted to show ancient texts. The prophecy said the heir would take the lowest position among another species. Would be invisible yet observant. Would find wisdom in simplicity and strength in humility. Your parents believed. So they sent you away, gave you a false identity and waited. Waited for what? Alan demanded. For you to complete your transformation. For you to become the leader our empire needs. Torvin leaned forward. Alan, your father is dying. The empire requires an heir. But not just any heir. One who understands that power isn't about dominance. One who's learned that the smallest voices sometimes carry the greatest wisdom. Alan looked at Tommy, at Beth, at the humans who'd taught him everything the prophecy had predicted. And if I refuse? Then the empire will fall to your cousin who believes might makes right. Who sees species like humanity as resources to exploit. Torvin's expression was grim. Your father held him back. Without you there's no one else who can. Beth spoke up from the corner. That's not fair. You can't put the fate of an empire on one person's shoulders. Fair or not, it's reality, Torvin replied. Tommy walked over to Alan and took his hand. Will you have to leave? Forever? Alan looked down at the small boy who'd asked him about his family all those months ago. The boy who'd started everything by simply offering to help carry trash. I don't know, he admitted. The coronation is in 1 week, Torvin said. You have until then to decide. After the council members left, Alan sat with Beth and Tommy in the empty conference room. Outside, Earth continued its awkward dance with the galactic community. Inside, a janitor grappled with the revelation that he was born to rule an empire. What are you going to do? Beth asked softly. Alan was quiet for a long moment. I spent 4 years learning that the people everyone overlooks are often the most important. The janitors. The nurses. The construction workers. The teachers. Now I'm being told I can use that lesson to change an entire empire. He looked at Beth. How can I say no? You can't, Beth said, tears in her eyes. But that doesn't mean we won't miss you. Tommy hugged Alan tightly. Promise you won't forget us. Promise you won't forget that you used to be a janitor. Alan hugged him back. I promise. And Tommy? Thank you. For seeing me when no one else did. For teaching a prince how to be human. 1 week later, Alan left Earth. But he took something with him. A photograph of a little boy helping a janitor carry trash. A reminder that true nobility isn't about birth or titles. It's about choosing kindness when no one's watching. And somewhere in the galaxy, an empire was about to learn that lesson from a janitor who became a king.